thank you everyone for coming along. For those of you who I have not yet met, my name is Mark. I'm the head wine buyer for the company, but also we dabble quite a bit in spirits as well, very happily. So tonight is our first online spirits tasting. We've been doing wine tastings for the past 17 weeks. However, this week we thought we'd branch out slightly and move into whiskey. And I was going to say it couldn't have been a better time, almost the middle of winter where we are. But today in Sydney was one of the most glorious winter days I've ever experienced. So, but either way, I'm sure we'll find as good an excuse as any to have a wee dram. So I thought I'd just quickly introduce my team here. So on my side, the United Seller side of things, we've got Luke, who'll be handling the chats. Say good day, Luke.
Hello. Good evening and morning.
And morning. We've also got another Luke who'll be
the second one.
The second Luke Collins, who'll be talking about our Japanese whiskey this evening. And then from we've got Mark Westmoreland from who's going to be joining us from Wolfburn, obviously. He's calling in from 9:30 in the morning in Scotland. So thank you for joining us, Mark.
You're welcome.
And then we have Garth Foster from Ardbeg, who's a representative of Ardbeg. So each of these gents is going to be talking to us about their whiskies, of course. And I'm just going to hand over to Luke just for one moment because we have a nice little promotion we're running tonight as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, welcome everybody. As Mark said, really, really excited to be launching our first spirits tasting. And certainly we've got some good things to get through. So looking forward to them. Just a few kind of details with regards to how we run our Zoom online tastings here. Firstly, if you're interested in commenting, we'd love you to. We want it to be as kind of engaging and interactive as possible. So feel free to just unmute and jump in anytime you'd like. If you're not too comfortable doing that, you can use the chat box. Drop us a question and I'll put it towards the experts. That's not a problem at all. We're also Facebook live streaming. So if anyone has any friends or family who think, would be really interested in getting involved, feel free to share that link with them. We're hashtag join us for a drink as well. So please feel free to get involved that way. As you can see on the screen, we've got a little competition. So basically what we'd like you to do is text in to the number there with your name, your email and your favorite whiskey. You'll see the codes just below, and the winner gets a $50 credit for their next order. So it's a pretty substantial prize. Certainly I think you could put it towards a nice whiskey. So yeah, looking forward to getting involved.
Beautiful. Thank you, Luke. So now we jump from one Luke to another. We're going to be first of all, visiting Japan, the marvelous whiskies of Japan. So I'm going to hand over to Luke Collins now, who's going to be giving us the introduction to Kaiyo whiskey.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. Okay, so, well, look, it's end of the day for us in Oz, so kind of getting straight stuck into the whiskey is kind of the first priority here. Obviously, we'll talk about the history behind it and a little bit more in depth in terms of the flavor profile and the nose. But if you do have the glass already poured, then absolutely tuck in. I myself have already started. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit more in depth again, like I said, about what influences each thing that you're going to pick up. Like if you straight away on the nose, and this is one of the biggest things for me with Kaiyo in particular, and there's a couple of other Japanese releases, like on the nose straight away, you get the kind of classic notes that you would expect from a lot of different whiskeys, but straight away, the first one for me is incense that you would burn at home or something like that, or, obviously traditionally in temples and whatnot. And then, of course, sandalwood, which is for me, I suppose to describe it would be a brighter wood note that you'd pick up on the nose. So definitely picking that up. And we'll talk about why you'll notice that in this whiskey more so than you would in others in a minute. But delicious. And okay, finish the day. Perfect. So Kaiyo is quite, not a unique, but quite a different production. It's not your typical Japanese whiskey. And you'll actually note that they don't specifically refer to it as a Japanese whiskey, and it's interesting why they don't do that. But to kind of understand that, the history of Kyo, it started almost 13 years ago now, and it was sort of the brainchild, half and half, with, as you can see on the screen, a former employee of Asahi, actually a pretty high up member of that. He's known as Mr. Watanabe, and he is not the easiest of persons to track down, so you very rarely see reference to the full name, which is interesting. But what he managed to do was, because of his connections, he was able to purchase whiskey from a distillery, which obviously kind of gives away the surprise that Kyo doesn't have its own distillery. And there are quite a few productions or quite a few bottles out there where they don't distill the whiskey themselves. And what they'll do is they'll purchase that whiskey. Typically, a lot of them will purchase it already aged, actually. And Kyo separates themselves from that because they age them themselves after purchasing the new make. And what they do is they'll purchase the new make spirit, the whiskey, before it's gone into oak barrels. They'll purchase that from a distillery in Japan, which is unknown. And the way to make sure that it's unknown is through a technique, as you can see on there, called teaspooning, where the idea and the principle and why it's named teaspooning is you produce a single malt whiskey and then just drop in a teaspoon of a different single malt whiskey. So it really, in essence, it's not about changing the whiskey. It's not about changing the flavor profile or anything like that whatsoever. It's more so in terms of business. So you then can't market it as, for example, a Hokushu whiskey. You can't market it from Yoichi distillery if it's from there, which, hey, we don't know if it's from there or not. And it's part and parcel to do with marketing and branding and to protect that. And it's interesting because with Japanese whiskey, especially and globally as well, getting aged releases and getting whiskey in general is very, very difficult. Supply has not kept up with demand. And so this is where Mr. Watanabe comes in, where through his connections, he's actually able to secure some whiskey, which is extremely difficult to do. And he then obviously decides to mature it himself. Now, this isn't just his decision. There's a really important person behind the project of Kyo, and that's a guy called Jeff Karlovich, who is a fantastic winemaker. He's been in the whiskey, speaking about wine all day. He's been in the whiskey industry for, well, decades now. I'd imagine Mark and Garth probably are familiar with his name as well. And he is and has been working on for now the past almost 13 years, producing Kyo and working with this fantastic oak that we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. So it's interesting to see him work with this teaspooned whiskey. He's actually kind of famous for saying that he doesn't even think it has been teaspooned. It's more a legal side of things. It's not necessarily about the whiskey making itself. So if we do look at, for example, the oak that we then put the whiskey into, that's, there we go, Mitsunara oak, which is a Japanese oak tree that you find in Japan, native there. It is, as you can see from the photo in the background as well, it's a pretty gnarly tree. It's not your kind of straight up and down thing. So it's obviously, you look at it straight away and it's a difficult thing to work with. I mean, when you're creating casks, the coopers, the guys who are skilled enough to produce the casks, they have to create the casks without gluing and sealing and nailing and things like this. So they need the pieces of wood that they work with to be perfect. They need to shape them, measure them, and work with them absolutely perfect, but they need to be cut completely right. So it can be difficult when you're working with a tree that's clearly trying its best to not be cut into shape, right? So one of the big things, again, like I said, on the nose, when you're going back to the whiskey, and do get back into it whenever I'm talking, don't, just pay attention to this, enjoy the whiskey as well. You'll notice from Mitsunara, it has that sandalwood, that incense sort of appeal to it. on the nose as well, I get quite a lot of flowers, almost kind of jasmine as well when I'm smelling that. And a lot of that is key to the Mizunara oak. It has almost a stereotypical Asian sort of influence on the actual profile of the whiskey, which is a little bit weird to actually say, because obviously it's, you know, it's just a tree. It's not specific to Asia, but it's interesting to kind of pick that up. And when you actually do take a sip as well, you should notice when you put it into your mouth, you'll notice there's a bit of chew to it. There's also a little bit of kind of black tea savory to it as well. And again, this is very, very important to consider the oak used in this. And yeah, so it creates quite a unique process for it. Mizunara is not only difficult to cut and work with creating the barrels, it is an absolute nightmare once you've put the whiskey into the barrel. And this is one of the things as well. It's extortionately expensive to make the barrel. And then once you've got the whiskey in the barrel, it leaks all the time. It is probably one of the most porous oak trees around. So when you're working with it, the oak itself is actually, the barrels are leaking. And when you do age whiskey, as Mark and Garth might mention later on, you experience evaporation of the spirit. So you get what's called the angel's share, where you lose a certain portion of the whiskey in there to evaporation. Now, that will happen more, and you'll lose more when the oak is more porous as well. But on top of that, you don't only lose whiskey to evaporation, you actually lose it to direct leaks as well. So it's really interesting to see them use this. It's a challenge, but it's a challenge that really pays off because it lends a very unique touch that otherwise you wouldn't experience on most whiskeys. So talking about the Mizunara oak, again, on the finish, and a really important part about the whiskey here, all three tonight have got really good length of finish. This is still going. Again, very, very dry, very savory notes to it. Black tea, a little bit of salinity as well. But yeah, so that's a solid whiskey. I hope you guys are enjoying it. There is another point to discuss next, which is quite unique to Kayo also, and actually ties into the name of it.
Luke, just to interrupt you for 1 second,
Yep.
mate. We've actually got a question from the chat, from Garth actually, who was asking, do we know how the Mizunara oak is actually treated before it's turned into a coopered barrel?
So yeah, really good question. You mean it's a little bit secretive. So they're working with a cooperage called Ariake, who are a really well-famed traditional cooperage, who are very difficult to secure projects with. So in terms of treatment or anything like that, not 100% sure. I do know in terms of the charring as well, they actually, and this is a part of what Jeff brings to the project, they actually char different barrels to a different level. So you'll have some barrels with a heavy char. You'll also have very, very light char as well. And it is literally a case of then Jeff taking these different casks and blending it together. And this is one of the big things that Jeff Karlovich is well known for and talented at, is he is very gifted at blending. One of the projects he also works with is something in America called Lost Distillery. He works in the American side of that, where they essentially try to recreate and reproduce whiskies from closed down distilleries, which is could be a nightmare because they do it sometimes without a sample of the whiskey. So it's interesting to see him do that, and he's also then taking this experience with the blending. Yeah.
Very cool. So sorry to interrupt you, mate. So we're now going to move on to the voyage that Kayo takes.
Yeah, and this kind of ties in, like I said, to the name of it. Kayo translates as ocean, and they do something that the first few times whenever you mention this idea to somebody who may not be familiar in the industry, you'll see it as a bit of a novelty. It'll sound novelty or gimmicky. While in barrel, the whiskey goes on a 3-month journey at sea. They travel from Osaka in Japan all the way over to Scotland. And it's this really interesting approach that they're not the first ones to do it. And it's funny because there's a cognac called, I think, Kilts, I think it's called, which is also sea aged for a little while. And that's where they got the inspiration for. And it's partly to do with, one, to show what that journey can do, but it's also partly to work with Mitsunara oak again. So the oak itself actually comes into play with the sea voyage. Part of the reason why is with Mitsunara oak, not only it's really trying its best not to be used for whiskey barrels. It's kind of evolved that way, it seems, where it leaks a lot. It loses a lot to evaporation. It's very difficult to make casks. But then on top of that, after the first few years of maturation, it really, really closes up and it really doesn't contribute too much. And it kind of dies down and goes to sleep a little bit. And the sea voyage is something that they do to kind of reinvigorate it and restart it and kind of give it life again. And part of the way they do that is by, as you can see there, it says they go over the equator a few times. So the climate is constantly changing. So it's getting hotter, it's getting colder very rapidly at some points as well. So that will help enable the whiskey to interact with the oak while in barrel. But
Very
on top
interesting.
of, yeah,
It's amazing. I mean, this, and we've got in here, the process known as materization. I mean, this, I've come across this in the wine industry a lot.
that's right, yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, so it's been happening for, well, centuries, absolutely centuries, because it was traditionally with merchants, it was just accidental that it would happen and it would change things and it would have this influence.
Yeah, like many things, it was a mistake. It was sent from the excuse me, the island of Madeira originally, just off Portugal and Spain, and the wine was basically sent to be traded, and it came back, and they hadn't found the right trade, but they noticed that after 3 months that it had actually, it changed quite considerably. So they actually still do this in Madeira, but they don't send it to sea. But they actually now store the wine in the vineyards, basically just above in the ceiling cavity. So there's no insulation, so it actually heats up, or they actually then that they can actually heat the wine up for a period of time as well, just to it's almost like it's cooked. So I'm not sure whether where they sort of spend at Kaya, where they spend the time above decks or below decks or whatever, but it was definitely the heat played a massive part when they were creating that materized wine.
Yeah, that's really cool to know as well, the kind of origins behind it as well. It's fascinating to think as well when, like I said, on face value at first you kind of think, oh, that doesn't seem like it's going to make a huge impact, but it totally changes the whiskey. It really does make a massive difference. And you've got all of these different changes. You've also got, like Garth pointed out, I mean, trying to juggle them. Not only are they leaking, but the whiskey inside's sloshing all over the place constantly whenever there's any movement. And so that all helps to force interaction inside the barrel, and it all helps to kind of squeeze out every little bit that you can from the barrel itself and from that Mitsunara oak to kind of grab as much of it as you possibly can. So it's really interesting to see that. I reckon as well, it almost has like I said at the end, kind of a savory note on the finish. There's definitely black tea, maybe a little bit of salinity as well. I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say it's the sea air on those 3 months doing it, but I mean, it's an interesting point, I find.
Absolutely. That's fantastic, mate. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut you off because that's your 20 minutes. So that was a fantastic summary of this incredibly interesting Japanese whiskey here, and on the journey it's taken and the oak barrels that it's in. I can kind of see why Mitsunara oak is not more readily used, I must admit. It sounds like it's a nightmare. A real pain to use, and why it hasn't taken up root in Scotland itself. But yes, so next, thank you very much for that, Luke. And now we're going to move on to our second whiskey here. So if you haven't already poured yourself a wee tumbler, then I suggest you please do so. And I'm going to hand over the microphone to Mr. Mark Westmoreland, who is going to be talking to us about Wolfburn.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Mark. Welcome everybody to Wolfburn Whisky. Welcome to everybody to Scotland as well. Over the next 20 minutes, I'll give you a quick rundown of who we are, what we do, what the future is, and obviously if you've got any questions, jump on the chat. That's the great thing about the whisky community. Everybody is so knowledgeable, and it's just that exchange information that we want as well. So Wolfburn Distillery, basically we're the most northerly whisky distillery on the mainland of the UK in a place called Thurso. That's a special place for me because that was my birthplace, that was my hometown for 19 years. So it runs through me. Cut me, I'll bleed Wolfburn, cut me in half. I'll probably have Thurso, Scotland, like a stick of rock in my core, in my centre, which is always a great thing to be, because if I can't be passionate about my hometown distillery, nobody can. So Wolfburn was an old distillery. Started in about 1821, lasted for about 50 years on and off, and then it went into rack and ruin. We actually rebuilt the distillery from scratch in 2012, and we've been producing spirit in Thurso since 2013. So we're 7.5 years in. We're a very new distillery compared to all the old distilleries in Scotland, all the well-kent names and the well-established distilleries across the world. But we wanted to, I suppose, make our own stamp, have our uniqueness, decide what we wanted to do ourselves, being the sort of the Northern Highland distillery, and have a distinct flavour and character. You see there, here we go.
Sorry, I've jumped the gun.
You've got your taste and notes, you've got your nose and notes and your palate notes there, which is great. Whiskey is so personal. Your own experience, your own memories of taste and flavour, you can relate to what you think you get from it. Our production process is using very modern techniques, but we're trying to do it in the traditional way, so without automation, and everything is done on site apart from our maltings. So we buy our maltings in, and we use our own traditional dunnage warehouses on site to mature. So we don't send our whisky on a voyage for 3 months. We keep it right at the distillery, and we're right on the coast. So again, we're looking at the outside environment to take an effect on our spirit. Just as Luke said, the porous nature of the oak and the wood, we want the outside environment. So we're right in the north coast. In a place called Thurso, Caithness, it's known as the Flow Country in Scotland. It's Europe's largest peat bog, and it's renowned for its flora and fauna. We're trying to get World UNESCO Heritage status for the area.
So Mark,
I think
we might actually just, if you wouldn't mind, Mark, I'm actually going to hand the screen over to Luke.
Okay.
He's actually going to take us on a bit of a 3D tour here, just to give a bit more of perspective on. So we're going from Japan here, obviously, but yeah, just to give a bit more perspective on where you are and kind of the unique position that you guys find yourselves in at Wolfburn.
No, that's brilliant. It's a good, a good VDA to do, show you exactly where we are. And as I say, this unique environment, we're right next to the sea. We're surrounded by gorse and heather. And as Luke was saying about the Mizrahi oak, the porous nature and the angel share. As the whisky evaporates, because wood's porous, we want some of that outside environment to come into our casks and help age and help add to the character and flavour and the traits of our whisky as well. So we certainly get that. We certainly get a wee bit of that maritime brininess, that saltiness you get. I get that sweet saltiness from the nose as well from the Northland. And the Northland you're drinking tonight was our first expression that came out in 2016. So to call it Scotch, 3 years in oak casks in Scotland, that's the laws. And our first distiller came up from Glenfarclas. Shane Fraser, he was given 2 instructions. Make a whisky we can sell relatively young, because we weren't doing gin, we weren't doing vodka, and we wanted to basically look at the non-age statement side of the whiskies, and I suppose, as everybody says, turn it on its head. Make sure that we can produce something that is phenomenal at a young age. And certainly when Northland came out, it got the industry talking. We were put on the want to watch list straight away because people couldn't understand, they couldn't fathom out how we were doing it so well, so young, so quick, which is a great adage for ourselves. And it gave us the motivation as well for every other release to try and better that. So the Northland's just over 3 years old. It's matured in second fill ex quarter casks. So the quarter casks, 120 litres in size, were actually ex Isla quarter casks. So there's a slight smokiness to the Northland, and that comes through the maturation because we've used a completely unpeated spirit in the Northland. So again, through our process, 3 to 4 days, lovely fermentation from clear worts from the mash, a very gentle distillation using a lot of copper contact. We don't fill the stills to capacity. So it gives it a lovely fruity floral note, and it's very light and it's very vibrant as well. And we want this DNA, we want this signature to go through all our expressions. And it was great when the Northland was released. It was released to world acclaim. I saw on your opening slide there, you made reference to the World Whisky Awards. Double gold, we got double gold in 16, at the 50 best we got double gold, 17 and 18, and it continues to win awards, which is great. And it's like, I suppose it's like me when I'm choosing wine, I'll look at the supermarket shelf or the shelf in my connoisseur wine shop, and I'll look for the gold medals because somebody somewhere has decided that that's the best. So it's a good indication, and we're getting some of the best awards across the world for our whiskies. I'm totally biased though, I am, I'll put that out there straight away. I love a dram, I love Northland, I love every expression that we've done, but I also drink other whiskies as well. I'm a greedy sort of character, as they say,
Mark,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt there. I just had a question come through from Facebook. What would you say to people who avoid non-age statement bottles without giving them the time of day, as has been sort of a bit of a trend?
I get this at whiskey shows quite a lot. Folk will walk past and they'll say, "Oh, I'm not interested because it's non-age." And under my breath, I'm shouting cowards. I'm shouting after them. I'm wanting a bite. I want a wee bit of fight with them because, again, we're trying to break down the stereotypes. We're basically saying to these guys and girls, come along, just come to the stand, have a taste, and then give me your opinion. But don't just walk past without being adventurous. So again, I like to challenge them. People that avoid non-age statement whiskies, they're missing a trick. They really are, because there's so many whiskies now across the world that are doing some great innovational things. They're using different casks, different production methods, different barleys, different types of yeast as well. So, the world's exciting for whiskey making. Just because we're wanting to do it the traditional way, it doesn't mean that every whiskey will have that traditional taste. I actually sort of describe like whiskey making as like a wheel. You can take a wheel anywhere across the world and roll it, it'll roll. But in every different country, people will change a spoke or change the hub, and they'll have their own nuances on how they make it. So our unique process, I was actually asked this when I was doing Dramfest in New Zealand this year by a food technologist, and he says, give me the one thing that makes your whiskey different. And I was honest with him, I couldn't do it. I couldn't say to him, there is one thing that makes our whiskey unique. It's about our barley selection, it's about our process, it's about our maturation. It's very, very difficult to actually pinpoint it. I did tell him that blood, sweat and tears goes into making our whiskey, but that wouldn't taste nice in a glass. So we have to produce a phenomenal spirit. And he seemed quite happy at that response. But yeah, anybody that avoids non-age statement whiskies, you're missing a trick. Life's about experience. Let's grab it by the kahunas. Let's try it. If you don't like it, you can say you don't like it. But don't just walk past and shake your head. You know, give it a chance. And sometimes a lot of these guys that actually stop and say they don't drink anything under an 18-year-old, they're actually pleasantly surprised. And it's that, the epiphany, it's that moment that they just realize to themselves, I need to give myself a shake, and I need to actually knuckle down and try something different and be adventurous as well. Hopefully that answers your question, Jane, as well.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
That was a very, very good answer. Yes. So I'm just going to move on to the next page here, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a question that we had that I'd love to hear your answer on here. So one thing we talk about a lot in the wine industry is the concept of terroir, which is a French concept that it covers over a whole lot of different things, including, but definitely not limited to, the soil type, the climate, the aspect, multitude of other things, the obviously the grape variety, how it grows, the rootstock it's on, things like that. But the whole concept together is called terroir, and that basically is what leads to the ultimate individuality of flavor of a certain variety in a certain region, basically, in a very simple way of putting things. But can you kind of see that concept in what you are doing there?
Yeah, terroir, you know, it's the ground up. It's everything that, you know, that sprouts. It's everything that comes from that initial growth. And again, from a whiskey standpoint, you know, it's down to the selection of the barley, selection of the yeast. It's about the process. It's about the maturation and the wood aging as well to get character and traits of the whiskey as well. So yeah, terroir is, you know, it might be talked about a lot more in the wine industry, but it's a very, very important part of the whiskey making industry as well, because, as I said earlier on, I suppose everything that you do in that production of whiskey adds to the taste, the flavour, adds to the value for the consumer as well, because a lot more people are well-knowledged, and the internet's great for getting snippets of information, but a lot more people want to know the minutiae, the direct detail about a distillery. We are very lucky. We are a fiercely independent distillery. We're not part of any big Diageo, Moët and Hennessy, Pernod Ricard. No disrespect to these people either. I'm going to have to quickly shut the door because there's strumming going on outside. So that's going to, just bear with me.
Fantastic. So
I love a live stream. I really do. I love a live stream.
Nothing quite like it.
But yeah,
Mark, just whilst you're getting the door closed, I reckon it's time for a little fill. We can launch one of our many polls. Got an interesting question here. Which country drinks the most whiskey per capita? So I'm going to launch that onto your screens now.
Ooh, per capita. Interesting. Oh,
Here we go.
okay. That's a few early votes for Ireland. That's fair. All right. Pretty fair. Ooh, no one's saying Scotland yet.
I would have thought it was Scotland myself.
You know, Scottish people are very restrained and controlled with their drinking. Absolutely.
yes, I would.
As we all know.
Please drink responsibly. Yeah, this is what we want.
Especially at breakfast. Especially.
Let's give it 20 more seconds or so, and then we'll find the results.
Just a few more votes to come in here. Yeah.
Our biggest whiskey, our biggest market, we're in 36 markets across the world for being a small independent with 12 people in the whole company, only 4 guys on production as well. So it's absolutely immense for us. But our biggest market is Germany, actually.
Wow. Germany? Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. All right, well,
Okay.
Let's end it. The answer is...
So this is what everyone said. 5 votes for Ireland, 4 for France, 2 for Scotland. The answer is, in fact, France, believe it or not. I can see Anthony got it. Well done, Anthony.
Yeah, that as well.
Sorry, Mark, I'll let you crack on again.
No, not at all. The French market as well. They're they're drinking from an early age. They get a palate. They're appreciative of very, very many drinks as well. The French market for us is a huge market as well. I should have been going there next. In fact, October I'm due there, depending on if the travel arrangements make it. But it's a great market because they appreciate quality, they appreciate taste and flavour, which is what it's all about. I mentioned about how independent we were. It's a great thing for us that we're managing to come through the crisis as well that we're under, because we don't have those huge staff overheads. I'm the sort of global brand ambassador. My job has changed from being the world jet setter. I was in Australia and New Zealand this year just before lockdown. I am now sitting in my house with the pop-ups behind me, doing events like this across the world, which is great, because this is how the whisky industry has to adapt and survive as well. And it means that in future whisky shows will probably have a virtual element to as well, which is going to be great for the industry. It's going to engage a lot more people. What's better than sitting in your own house with your favourite glass, comfy seat, enjoying a dram for the comfort of your own home. That's a brilliant way to do it. And hats off to you guys. This is your 18th or your 17th tasting online, your first whisky tasting as well. So it's you guys and the suppliers that are coming into the area that we have to say thank you to. And that's from our heart at the distillery, because if it wasn't for you guys trying to get the brands and the names and the tastes out there, as I say, it's all about getting the liquid to the lips. That's the main opportunity for us to work in conjunction with you guys and say, let's get the spirit out there and let's see what people think and encourage some conversation.
Thank you, Mark, and we really appreciate it. And also, it's been really rewarding from our perspective as well to run it, and it's been so absolutely fantastic to have guests from literally every corner of the world. You're our first Scottish guest as well, so welcome. But yeah, having guests from France, Italy, everywhere, just to kind of connect with us from their own homes and connect with our customers in their own homes. And the best thing, of course, is that we don't have to worry about driving home. So
yeah, you're right, and it's great just sitting there. And sometimes it's like Christmas, I've done it, you're waiting for the postman to come, and it's just like that shriek of excitement when you open the tasting pack. And I've known guys that have actually, a week before the tasting, the bottles have gone, they just couldn't wait. So it's good. It's like a kid at Christmas, which is brilliant. I love that.
Fantastic. Mark, thank you so much for that, mate. That was absolutely amazing. And now we've unfortunately we have to cut you off there with 20 minutes. So now we're moving on to a fellow compatriot, Scott, but in a very, very, very different corner of Scotland, making a very different style of whiskey. So now we're going to hand over to Garth, who's going to walk us through the Ardbeg 10-year-old.
Certainly am. Thanks so much for having me, guys. If you couldn't tell, I'm definitely not. I'm not on Isla. So if you couldn't tell from the accent, you can definitely tell by the picture perfect postcard, digital image that is behind me. I've been to Isla, quite a few times, and the number of times I've seen it look like this is definitely in the minority. It's often much grislier. And I sort of really like that because, just to add on to our conversation that we were having before about terroir, there are lots of things that actually have to do with the terroir of Isla that actually make Ardbeg so special. First of all, it's spiritually. There's something about being on this tiny, remote island. It's about 40 k's by 25 k's, and it just gets pounded by the weather on a pretty constant basis. They say that the island's so small and the weather's so bad that if you're standing on one end of the island and try to spit into the ocean, the wind could pick it up and take it straight back over your shoulder, and it would land in the water on the other side. I'm not sure who's been smart enough to try that one, but I wasn't. But as well as sort of spiritually sort of being this big, bold, sort of hairy-chested whiskey, there are other elements that actually sort of really impact the whiskey. On a scientific level. So the first is the peat. So both taking the peat from Isla, it also sort of has, and that was going to be one of the questions that I actually just had for the last whiskey as well. Is I'm guessing if you're sitting on the biggest peat bog in Europe, I'm pretty sure the peat is very locally sourced. But the difference when it comes to terroir with whiskey, I find, is often where they might source this peat from, because it's going to have such an impact on that whiskey, because Isla is a very maritime area. We're going to get it's not just going to be sort of forest matter that this peat's made from. It's going to be quite maritime. So there's going to be bits of salinity in there. There's going to be sort of decomposing sea creatures and seaweed and things like that. So that peat definitely has definitely makes a mark on that. Have we all poured us? We've all poured ourselves a dram there.
I think we have now.
Yeah.
We're also just going to go on a little Google Earth tour of the island as well, mate. So we're just going to switch across to Luke's screen, and you please go ahead there, Garth.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, mate.
No, you're right. So this is this tiny island. So the landmass that we're looking at now is Isla, and above that is Jura. 9 distilleries now on Isla, and we are on the south on the south coast there, just right by the water, right next to we've got basically we have so we've literally got a few neighbors, quite literally a stone's throw away. I'm just waiting for some things to pop up on the map that I can call out. Can we zoom in there? Yeah. So this island was quite possibly one of the first places that whiskey first originated from and first landed from Ireland, as well as Christianity as well. So just to the bottom of the screen there, so a little bit further south, there would be Kilterden. I think you might see soon, and there is one of the oldest crucifixes, stone crucifixes from the 8th century, and one of the most famous. It's an incredible crucifix, which we'll sort of see, stone crucifix, which we'll sort of see on on some of the slides coming up. The body of water you see just on the left-hand side there is one of the locks that we draw our water from. Yep. And then there's a further one just in the bottom bottom left of the screen, a little bit further along. Under the cloud there on the left-hand side. So this is where it all starts. So this is Loch Ugadal. And the water basically just runs down. Well, I'm getting a little bit seasick here, a little bit plane sick. So the water basically runs down from this loch into the next, which is called Aranambest, and it's an amazing hike up from the Ardbeg distillery to sort of see these beautiful lochs. I was really spoilt the last time I was there, and somebody had there was a group of 4 or 5 of us sort of walking up and doing this hike, and someone from Ardbeg actually hopped on a 4-wheeler and, unbeknownst to us, had basically driven up to Loch Ardenambest and had a bunch of oysters, sort of locally harvested oysters, and we basically had these with some Supernova and a dash of Tabasco sauce, just by the loch. It was absolutely incredible.
Amazing.
Best bushwalk / ramble I've been on. It's no scroggin, no muesli. It's oysters all the way. So that's a little bit about the terroir of this tiny island. So only 1,300 people. So the biggest industry there is agriculture. Lots of sheep, far more sheep than people. And then whiskey is number 2. Some fantastic golf courses there as well. If anyone's ever lucky enough to get there, make sure you pack your clubs. It is incredible. And actually, just a funny story talking as well about being at home and not having to worry about driving. There's 2 ways to get to Isla, and one's by plane, and it's a tiny little rickety plane, and you just go up and down, and you see the you see the boat, you see the ferry under you, going, oh, look, I'm glad I'm traveling in luxury here. And then after you take off and this thing bounces around a little bit, you definitely just wish that you were on that ferry, sitting safely like a Japanese whiskey cask. But one of the funny things, it didn't happen to me, but a mate of mine actually rocked up and they hired a car from the port. And the car hire people literally said to him, and then they said, oh, look, do we have to worry about sort of drinking and driving, and how close are some of these distilleries, etc. And the car hire people said, oh, there's no police based on the island. They come across on the ferry, so we'll give you a call and let you know if the police are going to be here. So there's a chance of an RBT. It's like, oh, hang on a second. Like, this is the people selling. These are the people renting you the car are going to advise you when you might get caught DUI. But it's a beautiful distillery, just perched right there on the water. We do find that a lot of these distilleries were created to be on the water, simply just for ease of transporting, for ease of transporting these casks. And on Isla, we can sort of deduce that it was often as well, so you could sort of keep an eye out, and if you saw the British coming to try and tax you, you could sort of head for the hills quite quickly as well. Now, for those of you, we've all bought ourselves a dram, and it's without even sort of putting your nose anywhere near the glass, it really does sort of take over the room. And I'd love to see in the chat anybody who's got anyone who's got any ideas. I love hearing or seeing the tasting notes and hearing the tasting notes, either aroma or taste. Just by all means, please just whack them in the chat there.
Garth, if I could just jump in for one moment there. So we've had a fantastic question on the chat here, and I definitely agree with your point here that it really does jump out of the glass at you, especially compared to something like the more, I would call, for Scottish, for whiskey, I'd call it a more elegant style in both the Wolfburn and the Kayo. But it's definitely got that kind of seaweedy character, but it's not it's not as big as I thought it would be. And one of the questions here on the chat is that, looking on the map, you're located right next to some big names in Islay. Lagavulin and Laphroaig are definitely two big names. And so what separates you from these styles is the question. And I think, I don't want to jump the gun here, but I think there's definitely an elegance to this whiskey that I don't see in wines like Lagavulin especially. Lagavulin, I've been in a room on the other side of a room and someone's opened a bottle of Lagavulin and I've smelt it from the other side of the room. So it's...
Yeah, and that's one of the things I do absolutely love about Ardbeg as well. And the way I think about the different sort of peat notes on these three distilleries is I see Ardbeg as big peat, and then I see the other two as oily peat and a dirty peat. I just go big, oily, and dirty, and that's sort of how I sort of think of these. I'll get on to a little bit in just a second as to how I think we sort of change, and how I think our peat is a little bit more elegant. Or a little bit more, not a little bit more elegant, but sort of how I think we actually sort of achieve that, how we achieve that elegance, because it is sort of distinctively different. But I do love that big bowl, literally just being whacked across the face with a smoked fish or something. It really is, big and bold and hairy chested there. As you can see from the color, there's no sherry cask in this. This is ex-bourbon, so it's quite interesting as well, and almost sometimes a bit of a juxtaposition in sort of, it looks so innocent and delicate in the glass, yet how does it pack such a huge punch? So this is just 100% ex-bourbon casks, and aged a minimum of 10 years though. But as well as this distinction, this really big, bold, distinctive aroma and taste, there's also this really interesting balance, which I think is what you were referring to before, Mark, is that it's got this sophistication that it doesn't necessarily flaunt the peat. And I think also, in particular in recent years, there's almost been having peat as a badge of honor. And I see with some distilleries, and actually even some whiskey drinkers, where, similar to the age statements that we were talking about before, is that sometimes they almost just want peat for peat's sake. So pardon the pun there. where they just want to, they almost just, they're proud of actually just trying to have the biggest, boldest, peatiest whiskey. But for me, that's not the artistry of it. I mean, for me, it's not as much fun if you're basically drinking something that quite literally tastes like an ashtray, as opposed to something that has aromas of of a cigar. So one of the, actually, if you click onto the next slide, I think I might have something on there. Actually, a little bit further, there was a couple of the image of the still, but it's okay. It's easy to describe there anyway. But Ardbeg has a very short squat still. It's actually quite large volumetrically, but again, similar to our previous whiskey, we don't fill it. But we have this short squat still, but at the very top of the line arm, there's also like what's called a copper purifier, and it's basically like a second chance draw. So we want these big, heavy, bold fusel sort of type alcohols to sort of get to the top. But it's got this as it's going across that arm, it's got a bit of a second chance draw, and there's a little chute that about 10% of the vapors that actually get to the top there will actually fall back through and be redistilled there. So I sort of think that that very much helps with sort of creating this sophistication.
Fantastic. So one question that I was very, very keen to learn more about, because I'm definitely not in the expert side of things. I'm definitely more in very, very, very keen to learn more. Wine is definitely my wheelhouse, but whiskey is one that I'm very keen and actively learning more about. One question I really wanted to hear your perspective on was this second question here on what are the favorite ways to mix this unique style, because it really is, the flavor profile is so unique. I'd be really keen to hear your feedback on how you would make this into a cocktail or a mixed drink. Yeah,
it's not the first thing that and actually, I mean, Ardbeg is followed by such passionate, we call them Ardbegians, such passionate people that sometimes even suggesting what to mix Ardbeg with, whether it be a splash of water or even an ice cube, you sort of get some some pretty, not even strange looks, almost aggressive looks sometimes, and they, as a aside to that, we a few years ago we created a bit of a test product. Which was Ardbeg basically with much less peat, and then the head of whiskey creation was actually quite nervous that he was getting that many emails that eventually he thought they were going to grow into a phone call, and then there'd be one sort of dark, rainy Scottish night, and there'd be some big hairy ass Scotsman, saying, "Hey, hang on a second, why have you created this bluster? What's Ardbeg doing without the peat?" I think because it's got such an intricacy, we've got that big, bold, smoky, peaty aroma and flavor, but it also has a really interesting lemon, sort of honeysuckle, almost preserved lemon sweetness that sort of underlies that as well. So I think balancing it with some mixed drinks or cocktails that have citrus in them are always really exciting. Again, it would not to actually, you wouldn't be getting anything out of the whiskey, but making a Bloody Mary out of Ardbeg is absolutely delicious, because you've got this smoke coming through. And you've got some of this pepper and some of this spice actually sort of getting in the whiskey. Again, it's not really there to appreciate the whiskey, but it's an absolutely fascinating drop.
Wow, Mark, maybe that's one for your time zone over there now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
probably. Yeah, a nice breakfast thing. But yeah, it's like anything. You start with the best ingredients, you're going to get the best result, taste and flavour. So why not bang a 10-year-old single malt in a cocktail? It gets it to the masses. It just gives it another avenue to market as well. So yeah, all credit to you.
We've also got a new release coming out, which is part of our new standard line, which is called the Ardbeg Wee Beastie, which is a much younger whiskey, so it's only aged 5 years. And then each year you're aging a peated whiskey, you're sort of losing some of this, peat through into the wood. So I think that will be sort of fascinating to actually mix in some cocktails as well, because you're dialing up the smoke and the peatiness. But I also sort of like to play with not the smoke, like the smoke would sort of really sort of helps that Bloody Mary, but I like trying to sort of highlight some of those sweeter, fruitier notes in some other sort of sweeter cocktails, pineapples, lemons, things like that.
Fantastic. Just to jump in there, guys, looking at the time, we've got about 5 minutes left. So we'd love to get your texts in. Obviously, $50 credit up for grabs. So nice little prize there. There's been some really good tasting notes on the chat, so I'm sure there's a few favorites kicking around.
And then actually, I could probably answer that question about that top one there as well. And Ardbeg is it very much is an enduring whiskey. And I mean, we were legally, we started producing whiskey legally in 1815. We know that we're actually producing whiskey before that because we've actually got the arrest records of the guys that were making it illicitly prior to 1815. But during that 200-year stretch, there's times where we've been closed, we've been mothballed, so it's fantastic to actually to be up and running again. We're always definitely trying to explore new directions. Again, it's one of the great things about whiskey is that they keep that appellation very very strict. So it's always interesting to sort of work out how far you can sort of push those.
Fantastic. And one final little question. I know you, Garth, you've actually shown me some pretty interesting food mixes with whiskies in the past, but one that I know that absolutely really blew my mind was actually chili chocolate with Ardbeg. Was just incredible, absolutely incredible. So is there any other interesting mixes that you would suggest with food and Ardbeg?
Well, even prior to COVID, I was I've been putting on weight pretty steadily. I was a very skinny kid at school, and it's definitely only going one way. Chocolate always goes really well with any type of whiskey, I find. But I do love Ardbeg with chocolate. Even a Malteser actually is a good little one, similar to the Tim Tam Slammer. I'm not sure if you guys have ever done one of those, but you can do the same thing with a Malteser and Ardbeg. Meats, big bold meats. Are really fun. Cheeses, blue cheese is fantastic. Obviously, there's a broad spectrum of different sort of styles of blue cheese that you can get, but you can sort of really do some fun things with smoky whiskey and blue cheese. Sorry, I'm aware. I'm just going to keep talking, so please cut me off again.
That's absolutely perfect, mate. That's fantastic. Great way to end, and definitely reminding us that it is indeed dinner time. So
and beer as well, actually. Like I love
beer and whiskey. Little what do they call it?
Boilermaker.
A Boilermaker. That's the one.
Yeah. So that happened when the Boilermakers or the factory workers would finish their shift and get to the pub. They wanted the refreshment because they'd obviously been doing physical labor often in hot environments. They wanted so they wanted the refreshment of the beer, but they also needed to make sure they could got a bit of a buzz, so they'd have a shot of whiskey next to it.
Nice.
Half and a half. You see in Scotland as well, a half and a half.
Half and a half. Very nice. Very nice. So, thank you guys so much for all of your information there. It's been absolutely very, very, very enlightening. Now, I'm going to hand over to Luke. Have we got some names on the wheel to draw here now, mate?
We do. I'm just going to give the text messenger another quick refresh to make sure everyone's in. Feel free to text in very quickly if you haven't done so already. Really, actually, just whilst I do that, it was really interesting seeing the results come through. It literally has been a complete mixed bag in terms of split of what everyone's favorite is. I think it's pretty even, so that's been really good to see. That's obviously lots of people have got different tastes and are enjoying different things, which is great.
That's absolutely fantastic to hear, and also that's kind of, thankfully, that's exactly what we were hoping for. We were very much hoping that because these are three very, very different styles of whiskey, of course. And we were hoping to show a broad style, but for everyone to kind of pick and choose one that was their favorite, but try some different things as well. So that's absolutely great. That's bang on what we wanted. So perfect.
Fantastic. I'll just refresh one more time. We've got a couple of favorite whiskies come in, but no names. So I'm really sorry I can't fit you in. But look, thank you for texting in, and obviously from me and everyone at United Cellars, thank you for joining in. It's been great. I'm just going to grab the screen from you now, Mark, if that's okay.
Oh, Malcolm, Persian Feta, nice. Persian Feta and Ardbeg. Be keen to try that one, definitely.
Jaffa cakes are usually a good winner as well with whiskey. Jaffa cakes.
Jaffa cakes, very good.
Is everybody seeing that?
Yep.
Yep.
The famous wheel of whiskey. I'm going to give it a spin. Good luck to everybody.
There we go.
The true
Malcolm.
Scottish name. Fantastic.
Well done. Malcolm, we'll be in touch and we'll sort out that $50. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Malcolm. Beautiful. Okay, perfect. That's that wraps us up for this evening, guys and girls. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I hope you learned something. I know I definitely learned quite a lot from that event, and we look forward to potentially seeing you something again soon. There's a few more tastings coming up over the next few weeks. With the way things are in Australia and the world, I think we'll be running online tastings pretty much continuously from now on. So at least for the short term. So, but fine by us, absolutely fine by us. So thank you for joining us. Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you to all my team who've helped out every week. You're fantastic. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Garth. Thank you, Luke, for presenting. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you all soon. Cheers.